I'm honored to welcome Sherrod Brown, Senator Sherrod Brown, the senator from the great state of Ohio, one of Berning's colleagues and another great progressive in the United States Senate, to the program. Senator Brown, welcome.
Good to be back. Thanks.
Great to have you with us.
It's fun to be in your studio when we do it, but not today, but other days.
Well, I'm glad you like it. It's kind of funky, but it's a radio studio that's simulcast on TV.
People knew how palatial it was. They have a different view of this progressive, Mr. Hartmann.
Indeed.
It's beautiful. It overlooks the Taj Mahal. I mean, it's almost is a Taj Mahal, isn't it?
Well, and not only that, we own it. That's the nice thing, I guess. So,
all right.
It's that Mitt Romney, we built it. Right? We actually did. Some of the equipment here started in my living room in Vermont. But in any case, speaking of building it, you've got this plan for a national network for manufacturing, innovation, jobs, and this sort of thing. Tell us about this.
Well, we first of all, we know a number of things. We know that to create wealth, you either grow it, you make it, or you pull it out of the ground. And we don't do as well making things as we used to as a nation. We are a very productive manufacturing workforce. But not nearly as many people work, and we don't make nearly as much in this country. We lost 5 million manufacturing jobs between 2000 and 2010. But since the auto rescue, we've grown back about 500,000 of those jobs, and we need to do manufacturing, the kind of advanced doesn't mean we don't turn our backs on traditional manufacturing, but do the kind of advanced manufacturing we need to do. We need a bit more of a partnership between the federal government, and local governments, and business, and labor, and universities, and we've taken some steps at Youngstown, Ohio, the first place in the country to have something like this, called National Additive Manufacturing Innovation, is working with Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh and Case Western in Cleveland and Youngstown State in Youngstown and local businesses and community colleges to begin. It's sort of a teaching hospital model where there's sort of a specialty that grows out of that in the institution, in the Manufacturing Innovation Center, and then entrepreneurs grow out of that and create the kind of jobs that give people a shot at the middle class.
Yeah. It sounds like a great thing. Steve Keen is a professor of economics in Australia at Western Australian University, and he's sort of a regular on our program. And earlier in the week, he and I were talking about how there's basically these three things that have to be in balance in a macroeconomy, and the 60,000-foot view of an economy. One is the public sector, whether it's in debt or whether it's in surplus, the government sector. The second is the private sector, whether it's in debt or in surplus, and how it's doing. And the third is the balance of payments sector, which is basically the trade debt plus or minus any deals that we have with other countries, investments we have abroad, things like that bring money in or cause money to go out. And he made the point that the reason why Japan is relatively unaffected by a debt-to-GDP ratio of over 200%, and China is flirting with numbers at or around that, maybe vastly more than that. They're quite opaque, but doing just fine, thank you very much, is because these three numbers have to be in balance, that when you have a national debt of $16 trillion, that literally means that there's $16 trillion in the private sector that's in savings invested in that debt. So there's it's like double entry bookkeeping. But the plus or minus part is the trade deficit or surplus. And since the Reagan administration, we've had about a $9 trillion trade deficit in the United States since we really started seriously flirting with global free trade. And that those countries that have a surplus, like Japan and China, are able to run huge deficits without it affecting them, in fact, arguably to their benefit rather than their detriment. They have all kinds of elbow room for government to do things that can further enhance that. How come we never hear a conversation about our trade debt and deficit?
Well, it's interesting. We haven't, partly because, that's a very good question. I mean, I'm troubled by that and have been sort of puzzled by that over the years. I remember during the Ross Perot campaigns, and he's not a guy I normally would use as a model in much of anything in terms of his policies, his political thought and policies, but he talked about sort of the twin deficits we faced in the early 90s, budget deficit and trade deficit. and we know what that means. It means that jobs, when you have, and my focus was always more, I mean, on both, but always more on the trade deficit. When you have, if you're selling $1 billion more than you're bringing in, two countries are selling more than they're bringing in, or bringing in more than, that are exporting $1 billion less than they're importing. They end up, it clearly translates into jobs. George Bush the first said that $1 billion trade deficit is about 13,000, translates into about 13,000 jobs. And you multiply that out to our hundreds of billions of dollars in trade deficit, and it's clear that if you're not selling enough and you're buying a lot more, that over time you've got a problem. And as you point out, as that professor points out, it means what conservatives are always saying when they talk about the budget deficit, only that half of it, not the trade deficit, that we're paying, that the Chinese we're borrowing money from China to pay this trade deficit, which in many senses we are.
Yeah. Yeah. And running a budget surplus actually would give us the ability to not so much worry about a budget deficit, because, it all has to do with the economy, in this kind of macro sense, without super getting wonky on economics here. How can we change that dialogue? I know you talk about the trade budget deficit, the trade and the need for a trade surplus, and how we can bring about a trade deficit. Is there any kind of a caucus for this in Congress? Is there?
There is. There's not really any kind of a caucus for it. There's a group of us that talk about it. There's a larger group in the House. When I was in the House until 2006, there were a couple of times when we almost defeated trade agreements because a coalition of some pretty conservative Republicans that might have opposed, that were sort of more isolationist in nature. Mm-hmm. Not that I didn't like kind of their approach. I liked where they ended up. And then there was a group of progressives and a group of people that just understood that our country gets poorer when we don't make things. Okay. And I think you're seeing they're seeing a renewed interest and focus in manufacturing in the Senate now. I don't think people see it in terms of trade policy as much as they should. But there is, I think you notice when you're buying things, people they're trumpeting more "Made in America" when it is. Mm-hmm. There are some policies in this country more that way coming out of Congress, but more tokenism than something for real. But I've always found the country has been in a different place from trade than Congress. I remember years ago, Trent Lott said, Republican, very pro-free trade leader in the Senate from Mississippi, he said, we have to pass trade agreements in odd-numbered years. We can't ever pass them in even-numbered years because of the elections, which, if that doesn't tell you something.
That should be a huge warning. So, I think the average American can remember, most people are old enough to remember a time when most goods bought in America were actually made in America, and that's certainly not the case now, and people know that there's something just intrinsically, intuitively wrong with that. We have a little less than a minute left.
It's all kind of come at the same time. It happened, you'd said the Reagan years, and it was beginning to happen before that. 1973, you're right about that, when it accelerated. 1973, if you look from 73 on, since then, workers have continued to be more productive. We had a trade surplus prior to 73, so the trade deficits actually started in 73, partly because of oil, but other things. Our workers have been more and more productive, profits have generally been up, and wages have been stagnant or worse. That's partly because of the decline of unionism, trade unions, but it's other things too. But that's really been the time that we've not grown this economy, and with the economy growing, we've not spread it around to those who are the most productive, the workers.
Yeah, very, very well said. Senator Sherrod Brown, brown.senate.gov, his website, and sherrodbrown.com as well. Thank you, sir.
Good to be back.
Great to have you with us.